Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules.
So what are you proposing?
It's simple. Kill the Batman. Here's my card.
Hello, St. Louis!
What if they're not listening from St. Louis?
Everybody's listening from St. Louis.
Alright, well, welcome to St. Louis, and I guess anywhere else you're listening from.
No, not anywhere else, only St. Louis. I've never been to St. Louis, but I've decided we need a huge following there.
That's great, Gus. Can I just do the introduction now?
Yes, you may.
Welcome to the Name Pending Podcast. You're here with Jack and Gus hanging out in the living room.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Gus.
And this is Name Pending Podcast.
So is that your podcast voice there, Jack?
Why, yes it is, Gus. Do you have a problem with my podcast voice? Should I just talk a little more normal for you?
Well, you know, eventually you're going to get tired of the excitement of your voice.
I will never get bored of the excitement of this podcast because it is going to be the most epic podcast to have ever podcasted.
Did you just create a verb there?
Yes, podcast is now a verb.
All right, then. You heard it here first on Name Pending Podcast. Podcast is now a verb.
No, podcasting. No, you're right. I said podcasted. My apologies.
Thank you, Jack.
This is the hottest podcast in my house. So we've decided to start a podcast based on the fact that we yell and talk at each other on a regular basis and thought maybe other people would want to hear it.
So why start a podcast? Well, we like to rant a lot about many different subjects.
Or said subjects.
So we thought, everybody loves to listen to us. You might want to listen to us.
I really don't think anyone wants to listen to us.
Well, we're about to find out, aren't we?
Like, can we leave this running?
Yes.
While we're playing Rocket League?
Yes, but you're going to have to edit, 2 hours worth of talking.
Or you're not willing to spend 2 hours on our podcast? If you're listening, listeners, could you please email us in to say whether you would like the podcast to just be me?
We're barely into the podcast, and Jack's already trying to get rid of me. Do you even know what the email is?
No. Am I supposed to know what the email address is for the podcast?
Yes.
I know what the Twitter handle is.
Well, what's the Twitter handle?
It's namepending_pod. I don't know about underscores. I'm not sure what an underscore means. It wasn't important enough to get a space. You had to put something in the space. An underscore.
Well, we were a little late getting the Twitter handle there, Jack. So we had to put the underscore in. But the email is much worse. What's the email?
Well, Gus, the name pending was taken at gmail.com is our email address. Why, Gus? Is that our email address?
Again, we were very late getting the email.
But you didn't answer the question, Gus. Why did we take that email address? Because name pending was taken.
All right, Jack. That's enough of the fun. It's time to get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast.
Well, Gus, luckily I love meat and potatoes. Let's do this. So what we're looking to do here is probably every week. Maybe even more than once a week. I don't know.
Wait.
We'll see how it goes.
Wait, did you just say probably?
Okay, so definitely more than once a week. No, I don't know.
Well, it'll be up to, the listeners' want.
You know what? I don't believe that. because the listeners are not going to record these podcasts. So I feel like it's up to us to decide how many podcasts we're going to record every week. But basically, no, Gus, just listen to me for a second here. I know you want to say something, but here's what the plan is. Now, Gus, go ahead and tell us what the plan is.
Well, the plan is for 2 rants. One from me, one from you, Jack. Rants that we are very, very invested in for this week.
Would you say passionate about, Gus?
Would
you say we're passionate about these rants?
I would say that we are beyond passionate. If there was a word for beyond passionate...
You know what? I couldn't tell you what the word for beyond passionate... I feel like... Okay, you keep talking, Gus. I'm going to Google beyond passionate.
Excellent. So, I will tell you my current rant for the week. My rant is on other podcasts. Yes, this seems vague.
Just a second, Gus.
Oh.
Can I cut in for a second?
Jack's ready to go.
What am I Googling again?
All right. Beyond passionate.
Okay, continue on.
Okay. So my rant, again, other podcasts. We all know that that's vague, and we all listen to other podcasts, or else you wouldn't find something as obscure as our podcast. So, my rant on other podcasts is very specific to the podcasts I listen to. I will not name them by name. I do not want to insult the people. They're probably better at it than I am.
They're definitely better than you are.
All right,
Gus.
excellent. But for today, I'm going to pick apart the things I absolutely despise about other podcasts. Things that we will not do in this podcast because they would drive me insane unless they were giving a ton of money.
So looking at Google...
Google will make a lot of appearances on this podcast.
For synonyms of passionate, ardent. I like ardent. We are ardent about these rants.
Excellent.
Ardent. Or wistful? I don't know about that one. Wistful? Like, maybe a little bit. It might happen at some point that we might get a little bit wistful about a rant.
All right, well.
But go ahead, Gus. Why don't you just like break us off with that first rant?
All right, so
of the podcast ever.
Whoa, pressure. All right, well, then I'm going to bring it. I am wistful about
Not wistful. I would say ardent.
All right,
ardent is better.
I am ardent about these 4 things I hate about other podcasts.
So, just a second, Gus. Your rant is about... This is our first episode ever of the podcast. Name pending. Like, we didn't even come up with the name of this podcast.
Whoa. We came up with a name.
No. We didn't come up with a name. The name of this podcast is pending a better idea.
I disagree. I feel like name pending is a better idea.
No. We both realized that when we came up with name pending, at some point we're going to name this podcast. Because it's pending a real podcast name. But go ahead and pretend that we're superior to other podcasts, which we're not. But go ahead, continue your rant on the podcast.
I disagree. I feel we're superior. But anyways, 4 categories. First category.
Just a second. You created categories to your rant?
Yes!
Okay.
Because there are 4 reasons why I hate other podcasts.
I just needed to get that off. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Excellent. First category. The length of their start. That's when I'm going to start with my first category. Now, before you freak out, I would like you to understand. Podcast. You're supposed to grab their attention at the beginning. Be exciting. I'm sorry. If you take 6 to 10 minutes, I'm not trying to be specific. It's just a podcast I recently listened to was like 7 minutes.
Was 6 to 10 minutes an official rant portion?
Yes. I'm sorry.
If it was 5:50 or 10:10, you'd be okay with it. Just so I get on board, Gus.
I guess
with the rant, what the rant's about.
I guess it depends how long that 5 minutes is. Anyways,
no, sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. 5 minutes is always the same length.
Jack, just shut up and let me do my rant?
It's 60 seconds, 5 times.
Jack.
I'm going to be quiet for a little bit.
Okay, so this is our first podcast. You need to understand. You need to let me rant, then feel free to jump in later and be like,
But
hey.
I think we both know that I'm one of those people that cuts people off. So you're going to have to accept, Gus, that Jack is just going to... But continue on with your rant. Go ahead.
Okay, I've lost where I went. But anyways, so length of start. I'm sorry. If I start your podcast and you start by telling me all about your podcast and about, hey, I'm going to decide today, this is what we're talking about. This is how we're going along. This is my best friend's sister's conversation about this.
So, Gus, can I just cut you off for a
Oh
second
my
there?
goodness, so it begins.
So, didn't we just start off the podcast by telling them what the podcast was about, who we were, and stuff like that? Just, isn't that what we just did on our podcast?
But you know what we did first? We had an introduction. It was our introduction that you will hear in every podcast.
And I'm going to guess that our podcast introduction was less than 7 minutes.
Oh, it was by far less than 7 minutes. I believe it was 5 minutes, and I believe that you were unhappy with the fact that it was 5 minutes.
Why was I don't remember being unhappy with it. Why? Well,
You were unhappy with our music. I believe that you believed it was too long.
the very beginning I feel was too long, but I feel like I still stayed with the idea of being less than 7 minutes, because 5 minutes, Gus, is less than 7 minutes. I don't know if you knew that, but 5 is less than 7. So I'm gonna jump out again, jack out for a little bit. Why don't you go ahead and continue on with your rant?
Did you just use jack out? Is that going to be your saying? Is that what you're coming up with?
I don't know. We're going to let the listeners decide that. Why don't you email in to... What's our email address again? Gus, the email address. Quicker.
Podcast pending was taken at gmail.com.
So I almost feel like at the beginning of this, we said the podcast was pending at gmail.com. It's not the one. It's podcast pending at gmail.com.
So, for the record...
Oh, podcast was pending at gmail.com.
How many times did you officially get that wrong?
Officially...
Because you still haven't gotten
just
it
a
right.
second. The official, absolutely from Jack's mouth, the email address for us is namepending was taken at gmail.com. I apologize for all the confusion that Gus has created, but Jack has spoken. That's the email address. We're good. We're going back to his rant now. I'm not sure we're going to like it, but let's get back to the rant.
Thank you for settling that, Jack. I can't believe that you have taken over my rant, but this will happen, ladies and gentlemen, constantly. My rants will be constantly taken over by Jack. Anyways.
Yes, they will.
Back to my... So, length of start, I'm sorry. You will lose me. I will literally turn your podcast off. If it, after 5 minutes or 7 minutes, I believe I said 7 minutes.
7 minutes or 6 minutes and 59 seconds. The 1 second after that, Gus is gone.
Gus will be gone. He will take off. He will turn you off. He's got lots of podcasts on his phone. He's ready to go with a new podcast. I'm sorry, if you get to 7 minutes, I'm gone. I don't care what you're talking about. You're talking about politics. You're talking about...
Just a second.
Whoa.
I thought you said, Gus, you're talking about introductions. Like, if they're talking about politics, is that not part of the podcast?
No, because if they haven't started their podcast...
How do you know when it started, Gus?
They do their little introduction. Because every podcast has a little introduction.
If everyone right now could pause the podcast and go back to 5 minutes and show that we played some musical intro to the beginning of our podcast, I feel like that's what Gus is talking about.
Agreed. Like, you immediately knew the podcast had started. We had gotten into our podcast. Now you